For our audience that are not in this utility space, you mentioned that solar can compete with other sources of energy. Can you give us some thoughts? If people didn't care about the renewable part of the solar energy, is it more cost effective to use solar on your rooftop versus getting gas or coal or from some plants that's far away? Does it pencil out?
So I want you
financially?
I want you to imagine that being on the grid or being on the utility is a lot like being on a spider web, where if something happens way over here, you feel the effects of it way over here. If a power line goes down, obviously you feel the effects of an outage. If a wildfire is started and large settlements have to be paid, you feel the effects of that in the utility cost. If the cost of natural gas goes up, you feel the effects of it over here. So you are tied in inextricably to so many market factors and conditions that the ability to be able to determine what your power costs would be in the future is almost impossible. With solar, you have your own little microgrid system, especially when we incorporate batteries, which every solar system moving forward today really should have this coupling. Because what you're doing is you're having your own power source and your own battery storing your electricity. Outside of the maintenance costs of that system, it's pretty dependable. We know how much power it's going to produce. We know what your power costs are going to be today as well as 25 years from now. So if you're somebody who's retiring or just financially literate and trying to control some of their variable expenses, solar absolutely gives you that control because you can determine exactly what your cost is going to be for that contract, how long that contract will be, what those terms are. You as the consumer have full control over that, which is very different. So if you have solar plus a battery and a wildfire happens and the utility has to pay out a big settlement because of that, you as the ratepayer don't feel the effect of that.
We've already subsidized solar, and some people may wonder, why should Californians pay attention to this space?
So a lot of folks have had someone come and knock on their door at some point about solar, and it's probably been annoying. I know that many people have dealt with that over the last few years, but there's an alternative universe that exists where those guys stop coming to your house because their jobs don't exist anymore, because the financial institutions that surrounded and supported that business were rug pulled and were essentially not able to recover. When that day happens and solar people are no longer coming by your house and bugging you, trying to tell you about it, that'll be the day that your utility raises its rates at its absolute highest because it knows it has no more competition. It's eliminated all of its competition through the stroke of a pen. So if you turn on your lights every day, if you charge your phone and you're watching this video on a charged phone right now, the cost of your power to do all of this will significantly go up. And with the cost of everything else between housing, food, energy, you have to find something in your world to be able to gain some control over.
Now, Johnny, you got into this at a young age. Can you tell us how you got involved with it?
Yeah, so I started to notice, it was in 2018, I saw a report that came out that the cost of renewable energies had finally gotten lower than the cost of fossil fuels. And I was always curious about that. I always thought that was fascinating. I loved the idea, even when solar was first coming out, of being able to go out camping and have a solar panel lighting up some of your equipment and these backup batteries. And so growing up in Utah, it's an amazing place. And the culture there is very, very focused on self-resilience and not depending on large government systems or corporations to be there to provide you with a lot of your daily necessities. And so when I saw that happen and I saw all of these companies making big investments into it, while at the same time the utility costs were starting to skyrocket, I knew there was going to be big opportunity in that space. And I was fortunate enough to be brought into a great organization, a large company called Sunrun. They're currently the largest residential provider out there. And they took us in and started training me up right away. And it's been an amazing career since.
So you managed to get into this industry and you started your own company. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I started my company, Pacific United Power, in 2021. Our primary focus was we wanted to educate as many solar sales representatives out there as we possibly could. One of the criticisms of the solar industry, and I think it's rightfully due, is the lack of education that some of the sales representatives have to undergo in order to get into the business. The state of California is unique in that it has what's called an HIS license requirement, meaning that the salesperson you're speaking to when you're looking to go solar is usually licensed by the state, but that license doesn't come with education. That license is simply just a background check to make sure that you're safe to be inside somebody's home or on their property, right? So the lack of education in the marketplace was really disturbing to us, and we found it was actually counterproductive to our business. So what my company focused on was we created some YouTube channels that were explaining how to properly explain these programs to homeowners, ways to be able to drive their attention towards this subject and show them the financial benefits associated. And then we began staffing sales reps all around the country and doing sales installations, and it's been an amazing experience. We've expanded into a couple of different states too.
And you're based in California, right?
Yep. Yeah, we're down in the Carlsbad area, so not too far from here, just a few hours.
Most of the panels manufactured are coming from China, right? How does that work?
That used to be the case. A lot of that is starting to change. A lot of it comes from Korea now and other countries as too. But when it comes to solar panel manufacturing, a lot of that always came from the cheapest bidder. These tariffs have been amazing for us because we're also in agreement that we would love to see the manufacturing of all of our solar plus our batteries done domestically. It would reduce our overall shipping costs. It would reduce a lot of other fragile elements that we would have to deal with when dealing with China, and we don't want to. If we could have our panels made here in the United States for the most part, and our minerals, everything that's needed in these batteries mined here domestically, it would create so many important jobs that would legitimize our business. So we actually welcome as much of that as possible because those tariffs have forced a lot of solar manufacturers to onshore their manufacturing here in the United States, which is great.
And are there a lot of them out there now that are manufacturing here?
So whenever we submit for a project, anytime we complete a contract, we have to submit what's called domestic materials. We have to show and prove how much of that content of the battery plus the solar was made in the United States in order to qualify for numerous different tax credits that exist.
Are the batteries made here, and who makes them?
So batteries are, depending on the chemistry of them, because electric vehicle batteries and a battery that's storing power in your home may be a little bit different. For example, like a performance Tesla, one that puts out a lot of power really quick, will have a larger silicon profile, meaning that more of that battery is going to have silicon in it, which charges up quickly and deploys power fast. Unlike nickel, where nickel will charge up a little bit slower and deploy power a little bit slower. So depending on the battery chemistry will depend largely on where those materials come from, but it's sourced from a lot of different locations. Then they have to be able to show where it's coming from in order to get a lot of these different tax incentives that are out there. So most of this equipment over the last 5 or 6 years has become more and more domestic made over the years. 6 or 7 years ago, a lot of it, almost all of it was made overseas.
And are these batteries, do they have enough bandwidth to handle a home? Can you explain to us how it works?
Panels will usually last about 25, 30, sometimes even 40 years, depending on the condition. Batteries, on the other hand, typically last about 10 to 12 years and will need replacement, depending on how much they're being used. If you're recharging the battery and deploying the power over and over and over again throughout the day, you'll go through your battery faster. If the battery is just sitting there at 100% charge waiting for a power outage because you have critical medical equipment that you need to keep backed up, well, then your battery will last longer. And so it's very important that you ask the solar company that's installing your equipment, hey, what's the battery maintenance look like with this program and what could be available for that as far as extending or replacing it goes.
And how safe are batteries for home?
It's a lot safer if we keep them in temperature controlled areas, like we always try to put them in garages, or if they're put on the exterior of a building, making sure they're encased. But explosive batteries, it's a pretty rare thing to happen. It mostly will happen in an EV, but they're all fire rated and we have to go through numerous permits. I mean, that's half the battle here in California. Our projects take almost 6 months to install here, where it is in other states, it can be 5-6 weeks. So we have to go through a lot of different fire hazard.
When a home goes on these solar panels with the battery, how often do they use the grid?
It just depends. If we design the system based around exactly what somebody uses, like exactly based on their consumption, then they're going to have to maintain those habits pretty much to the T. If they use any more extra power, then the utility will bring it in. So if I design a system out for 10,000 kilowatts a year that someone might use, but then they get an electric vehicle and now they're using 14,000, well, that other 4,000 is going to come from the utility at that point at whatever rate they decide.
And how fluid is it with connecting to the utility? Are you constantly buying and selling when you need it or when you have extra?
It's actually a fascinating industry. So on that front, there's live arbitrage of what's happening. So batteries are programmed to do what's called arbitrage, where they will store the power when it's least expensive and then release it when it's most valuable in live time and help out with getting a homeowner the best on their billing credits possible. So it's happening in live time through their smart meter that was installed in their home. And a lot of the homes got it in around 2012 is when they got those smart meters where they're now digitalized versus the little dial. And you used to have a meter reader that would come up and read the meter. We don't have that anymore. Those new smart dials can take power going both directions and record it in live time. It's pretty cool technology.